Welcome back, everyone. Episode 22 of the Property Journey podcast. Roy, we've made it to another episode.
Another episode, another year, new year.
A new year. We've been a bit distant, and we've had a few of our listeners have been calling where have we disappeared off to. But as we all know, Christmas time it's a bit hectic.
12 weeks before Christmas, always busy, and then this year it was worse. The Christmas rush started nearly the start of September, which I haven't seen ever before. So good complaint.
And we obviously, we're coming off the back of our last episode, which was the budget. There's obviously been sort of the fallout of the budget and a lot of the property, people trying to get their property through before some of the changes. So here we are, we're back, and we're going to be on schedule for the next episode every 2 weeks for the next while. We're going to hold ourselves to that, Roy. So we are. So don't worry, and folks, we'll be back with more episodes. Latest one then, 22. I wanted to talk, Roy, about the comparison between new build houses and older build houses. Obviously, yourself, you would have a bit of knowledge in this from property sourcing. Obviously, you help clients with property sourcing. Do you want to sort of delve into a wee bit about property sourcing?
With property sourcing, a lot of people don't really know what it is unless they're in the game. But if you're looking to buy an investment property, people automatically think that they have to go out and look and do the viewings and check the houses and do all the negotiation and doing everything, which you can do. But an alternative is you have somebody do that for you, and they're called a sourcer. And there's different ways that you can find sourcers, and there's different deals and different things that they can do. But ultimately, what they're doing is they're doing all that for you. But what you're paying for is their skill and their expertise. Going back many years ago, 20 years ago, whenever I was starting, and this is the same thing that the vast majority of people do when they're going to buy their first investment house, is they look at the cheapest that's available on the market, and that is the wrong thing to do. You need to have all your key factors considered, and if you have a sourcer who's doing this day in, day out, they immediately know this is the right sort of property, this is what it's going to rent out for, this is your return. It's a no-brainer. And you normally find it is heavily focused property investors, those who are geared at building a big portfolio, and those who maybe want a hands-off approach that's just simply give it to a sourcer, leave it in your capable hands, and away you go. It's the exact same as shares. If you're going to invest in the stock market, are you going to pick the shares and go through every single share yourself and review the company accounts? And if you do, you haven't a baldy clue what you're up to. Whereas you give it to a stockbroker or a fund manager who knows exactly, and you're paying for that skill and that expertise.
And that's because, as you say there, and obviously this episode, for people that are listening, it's not going to be solely geared towards property investment here. But for the likes of something like this, when it comes to picking properties, a sourcer is going to have first hand there of the area, of maybe potential streets, or, maybe knows inside out kind of what way the buildings are laid out, or what way they were built, or they might have first hand knowledge of potential issues within properties or a certain street, or those sides of things. So it does help when you have someone with that knowledge. Well then, the first thing I wanted to touch on then was kind of what's the difference now in terms of, and I suppose new build, when we're describing new builds, we're talking about probably new build developments. We're not thinking about self-builds or anything like that. We're just new build developments compared to older houses. Like, what would be the main difference in them at the minute?
Well, the viewpoint to answer this question, it maybe would depend on whether we're talking about if it's a first-time buyer, a homeowner, or an investor. But very simply, to distinguish between the two of them, a new build is what it says in the tin. It's a brand new house that's built, and you're the first owner of it. Whereas a pre-owned house is basically every other single house that's available on the market.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, to run through, it depends. You'd normally find a lot of investors wouldn't be geared towards the new builds, and they'd be more geared towards the pre-owned. Whereas at the minute, for first time buyers, we're seeing a lot more being geared towards the new builds.
And in terms of the actual building, the actual structural side of things, is there a difference in the way that houses are being built now? You know, and by that I mean, you know, there's probably a difference between like I'm thinking back to some of the Milford area here in Armagh, old red brick.
Yes.
You know, in terms of the new build developments, and looking at one across the road here now, it's red brick. But is it, you know, is there differences now in terms of the way that they're being built, in terms of the actual materials that are being used? Are they wooden framed houses? Are they, you know, is there a difference now between sort of the housing styles over the years as such?
There's been a variation over the years, really coming down to maybe whether there's been new ideas or new technology. You know, as you said, the very, very old houses, 100-year plus houses, were all brick. Then we moved to a point where it was, you know, cavity walls, where you have block on the inside, brick on the outside. Then there was a stage where there's some developments which are like what's known as prefab. They're basically just concrete slabs built together like a Lego house. Then it moved more traditionally to your traditional block houses, but ultimately, more recently, it's very common that a new development would be a timber frame house. So what a timber frame means is the inside of the house is all timber, so all the walls, they're all timber, but on the outside it's block or brick, and it looks like a traditional house. I suppose the main reason why they are timber frame, there's a number of reasons. One, I can't definitely say they're cheaper to build, but they're far faster to build. They're put together far more quickly, so I suppose that can make it a wee bit more cost effective because you're saving time, but ultimately they're more energy efficient, so it means they're far easier to heat up, which then makes them far more attractive, because living in them then means you've got a much lower heating bill.
Because that's where I'm thinking, and it relates back to that property sourcing side of things for me. You know, is these the types of things that you're looking at when you're going to buy a house? You know, is it, and you know, that energy efficient side of things? Is it, you know, the 100-year-old house that's in a terrace block? You know, are these the types of things that, you know, when you're looking at buying a house, that you should be thinking about then, weighing up whether you go for a brand new build house, or you're going for a, you know, I suppose we were saying older built but nearly pre-owned house?
It's a legal requirement that every house put on the market for sale and for rent must have an energy performance certificate, and that rates how efficient the house is out of 100. So basically it's rated A to G, and if you have an A rating, that's the best. Obviously, the other side of the spectrum is the worst. In my experience, you normally find quite a few buyers and renters don't look at that document, and they normally only experience the efficiency of it once they're living in the house for a number of months, or when they get their first winter past them. So I know ideally if I was buying a new house, as in a new house to move to, I'd be looking at the energy efficiency rating, and you generally find the newer the house, the higher the rating. Whereas if you go for that house that's 100 plus years old, very highly likely it's going to have a poorer rating. And when you have a poorer rating, it's more expensive to heat. And if it's more expensive to heat and to run, you're just not going to enjoy it the same.
And because I suppose my way of looking at it then is obviously, if we're looking at this in terms of the energy performance rating, a brand new, obviously new build house sitting with an A rating, you're not going to have to do too much to it in terms of the insulation's all there. You might only have to put the gas on an hour, 2 hours a day. Your house heats up, holds the heat. If you're buying a 40-year-old house or a 60-year-old house, or, you know, when that rating's maybe down in E or F or whatever, you know, your heating bill's going to be further up. But then obviously, is there certain things that you could look at where, you know, you could get insulation put in, or
you could buy a coat?
buy a coat, a couple of blankets,
For a couple,
you know.
just for a coat around the house.
Maybe have a stove in the house where, you know, you just leave it on all the time, you know. But there is obviously certain things which, you know, you could do then in considering, is that where just it's your own personal preference and what your consideration is then of what you can do with the house.
Again, it's whether you want the hassle and the inconvenience. You could buy that older house. Maybe you'd get it at a bit more of a discount or a lower price, and you could invest the money in it. So, for instance, you could get the cavity walls insulated. You could, put solar panels on, change the heating system. You know, you can do all that. You can spend all the money. It'll pay dividends for you. There's companies out there that will help you with that. There's grants available. I'll give a shout out to McGaffin Mechanical, good client of mine. Matthew can sort you out if there's anything like that you need changed. He'll keep you right.
Okay. And this is the thing, because it's back to that, we've sort of touched on it before, that, you know, do you buy a pre-owned house, or where you're maybe thinking about buying, you know, location, skills, that side of, you know, things, but also it should actually be then the actual house. In terms of the size of houses nowadays, are they any way different to what an older house would be? You know, is it kind of just what you're expecting to get?
Yes, it depends. You know, if you go into housing development, they're generally all of a similar size, whereas you compare that to the traditional, what's known as the council house or the council estates, those houses will be a wee bit smaller. But again, it's a personal taste. Maybe some people grew up in that house, maybe their grandparents lived in that type of house, and that's more than adequate for them. Whereas maybe you're a wee bit younger and you've maybe grown up in a newer house. So it's really down to personal tastes as to which you prefer for size.
I know, because one of the, obviously, whenever I was sort of doing a bit of research and looking at sort of the subject around it, was obviously then the sense of community as well. And obviously a lot of people would say that if you're in an older, say for example terraced row or sort of older housing development, that sometimes there's more of a sense of community than some of the new build ones. And if that's something that you're looking to enjoy, then those are maybe the areas to consider then. Yeah,
like in some of those, I could name 2 or 3 council estates, what they're known as, where it's generations have lived, and once a house comes up for rent or comes up for sale, the next generation has grown up, they're buying in it, and everybody's in each other's pockets, they know everything that's going on. And as you say, some people enjoy that, whereas maybe other people just live in a development. Like, I know people who live in a development that don't even know their neighbour's name, and their conversation goes as far as how you doing. That's a great day, and that's about the height of it. So it's up to yourself what you prefer.
Personal preference.
Yeah.
And they sort of talk then about the actual cost side of things when it comes to, you know, new build houses in terms of then the older built houses. You know, if you were looking at a new build now, say for example, just ballpark three bedroom new build house.
3 bedroom semis are generally in around 180 to 200,000 depending on the area.
If you're looking at an older sort of pre-built, you know, 3-bed house, is it likely to be cheaper than what you would be paying for a new development now? Well,
if you compare, so a new build development, semi-detached, as I say, you're talking 180, 200,000. You could still buy in a development. The house maybe be 5-10 years old. House price, probably something similar, maybe a wee bit less, because on average the new build should, you know, grab a premium because it is brand new. But the big extreme is compared to the likes of a council house or a housing executive house, depending on the area, maybe 115,000. So there's a big difference.
Because it's the thing, and again, there's a potential difference of between 60 and 80,000 pounds, and for some people that's, you know, well, it's half a house essentially when you compare it to a council house or one of those styles of houses. So that's where I was interested then in terms of the cost side of things. That's obviously purchasing. in terms of retaining value, is there a difference then in terms of that retention value if you're buying a new build house? And I understand it's quite difficult then to, just to be able to outright say it, because every circumstance is different. And the way house prices are going at the moment, every house is nearly retaining its value for the simple fact that there's so much demand out there.
On average, you would find the newer build house would rise more. And the simple reason for that is if you're in a new development, they build the development out in phases. So they'll build so many houses first of all. Those houses are released at a particular price. Then once they're all sold and completed, then they start the next phase. On average, the next phase that started is charged a bit more. So that means then the phase below it is worth slightly less. So that climb increases. So as each phase is being released, the new price is higher and higher and higher each time. So that ultimately then is pushing the price up for the whole development. So it used to be the case. I can remember years and years ago, probably about 15 years ago, once a new development was being started, everybody wanted in to get into the first phase, and people used to camp outside estate agents because they knew there was going to be a release date maybe next week of a new development, and people were queuing because they wanted to get in, because the difference between that first house being built, paying for it, for the whole development being finished maybe 4 or 5 years later, the price rise was phenomenal. But bearing in mind, there's no such thing as easy money or free money. If you're that first phase of the house, or first phase of the development, you have to, put up with construction for a number of years. Yeah. So quite rightly so, if your house value has risen really well, you deserve that because you've put up with, the inconvenience, the noise, the traffic, and basically you get the dividend then once the whole development is finished.
Potentially unfinished roads, things like that there, the infrastructure not being completely right, diggers driving past your driveway every morning, 6 o'clock on the button or whatever it happens to be. And then I suppose then in terms of, say for example, a house that's maybe 30 years old or 35 years old, is that essentially then in terms of a retention value, is that essentially moving with the market price then, as demand fluctuates and supply fluctuates, is the price then just rising
generally, yes,
with the market?
Generally it will. Now the only paradox to it all there would be there was some developments that were built during the last recession that maybe the builders went bust at that time, even though it was a brand new house and still maybe only 15 years old. It basically, it hasn't risen in value, or it hasn't risen much in value, and that's simply because just more of a reputation. So what we're talking about here is on average, but there are other externalities which can have an impact on it, and in that case it was a reputation. Development was half finished, nobody wanted to live there, and then that pulled the price down. And in some developments it's been very difficult to rebuild that brand in a development, and it's still tarnished. But ultimately what we're saying here is on average, broad aspect of it all.
Yeah, because obviously, as you say, they're touching on the recession and stuff, there was properties essentially being sold at ridiculous prices, and to see them ever recover to that could be even a long stretch. So someone that maybe bought in 2008, 2009 and they paid, I don't know, I'm going to say 110,000 for a 2-bedroom council house or something. Are you ever likely to see that again? It could be quite a stretch.
The good thing is, had you asked me this actually 7 years ago, I would have said no, never. The good thing is we're now seeing prices where in probably a good 80 to 90% of the market have now hit those peaks of the last boom and are now starting to go higher on. So thankfully it's only a very small portion that was badly burnt and badly damaged at that time. But everybody looks at that that last recession was completely unique. It was linked completely to property, and it's highly unlikely that those factors, there's other protection now in place to prevent such a scenario happening again.
Yeah. And probably I would actually give a shout out, I don't know if anyone's ever watched it, The Big Short, the movie. It was about the mortgage boom and the
Yes,
was it Lehman Brothers?
that's right.
Lehman Brothers, the collapse of it and stuff. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It is incredible. A lot of people, you know, if you're sitting and watching it, there's a lot of terms in it that are just flying about. They do explain it quite well, but still, even they actually just watch the basis of it. It's a good movie. Right. The other aspect then is kind of then if you're considering either a new build house or going for an older build house, then is obviously your layout side of things. In terms of the older houses, you're looking at probably your bog standard kind of. You're not going to be looking at open planned or anything along those lines. It's kind of your boxed in living room, you know, your kitchen's kind of at the back of the house. You know what I mean? It's kind of the standard layout.
Years ago, the old traditional house, as you say, yes, more the traditional, what was referred to as 2 up, 2 down. You had your living room, kitchen downstairs, and 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom, and that was it. Whereas now, new builds, the architects, the developers are getting very imaginative of how they are making full use of the space, and it's phenomenal how you could go into 2 houses that have the same square footage, but maybe just the layout is completely different in the 2 of them, and it makes such a difference.
And that's where I'm thinking about like the likes of your open plan kitchens, the island in the middle, that side of things. You know, you're not like, unless you're going to do maybe renovation works to an older house, you're not likely to see that, because it was kind of, as you say, the architects was kind of standard layout then. Now it's slightly different in your newer built houses.
Yeah.
And obviously then with your maintenance side of things, a newer build house, you would be expecting that you wouldn't need as much maintenance with it than what you would with your older build house.
Generally from day one, moving in, you've nothing to do. You simply move your furniture in, and that's it. You've got brand new boilers, brand new appliances, everything. In theory, you should have no maintenance, no issues for a number of years. Whereas if you buy a pre-owned house, the boiler is a pre-owned. You don't know how old the boiler is. That boiler could last you another 10 years. It could last you another 10 minutes. You just don't know. And that's just the difference. And maybe that's why, or that is why, the price of a new house is that wee bit more expensive. As a premium as well. Everybody likes something new.
And they relate sort of this one back to, the likes of the property sourcing. In terms of that maintenance side, and I'm kind of maybe bringing in a wee bit of like structural side of things. When it comes to property sourcing, a sourcer would be able to help with, for example, if they know there's maybe roofing issues in certain places, or they maybe know if there's subsidence issues in certain places. Is that kind of some of the stuff that you'd be looking at then?
Well, if you're buying as an investment, and if you're using a proper a property sourcer, then that sourcer will know particular areas, particular developments, particular streets. I could name you 4 or 5 streets where I'd say immediately you'll have damp issues in the front bedrooms, simple as that, or you'll have issues in roofs, and a sourcer will know that because they're seeing this day in, day out. Whereas if you're buying a brand new house, you've got the benefit of a 10-year warranty. So in the first 10 years, if there's any major issues with the structure of the house, so that's generally your foundations, your walls, or your roof, there's a warranty scheme to step in to fix it and resolve it and sort it out for you.
And obviously then the kickback then is if you have any other issues like that after obviously that warranty's out, then you're looking obviously at your home insurance, I would assume.
Yes, so generally the rule of thumb is once the 10 years is up, if there are no issues, well then the house is fine. If an issue does arise, well then that's just natural progression and wear and tear, and that's just part of life then.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I wanted to clarify that. I've kind of noted down there personal preferences, and we've kind of obviously talked about that. Obviously, people do say that it's obviously, for some people it could be it's not even about the house itself, it's about how it looks. They just like how the outside of it looks, and maybe the inside's planned out. That's as much as it goes. Don't really give a toss about the area that they're living in. If it could be 2 towns 30 miles away, but if they prefer one house and how it looks, that's maybe how they're going for it. In terms of then sort of future trends, obviously in Northern Ireland we are sort of that shortage of new build developments. Is it more a case of they're not being built because of infrastructure issues? A lot of people probably that are listening to this will know that there's been numerous reports, and maybe even the last 6-8 weeks from the NI Water about connections and the sewage and those sides of things. Is that what's holding back new builds being built?
There's probably two factors. The lesser of the two would be the requirements. So there was legislation changed there the year before last, whereby every new house has to have a very high standard of renewables involved in it. So that has put the cost of the build up. So there's no more traditional oil burners, as in your central heating. It all has to be heat exchangers and air source pumps and solar panels. That in itself is adding approximately £10,000 to the cost of the build. And at that time, developers are thinking to themselves, well, it's going to cost me 10 grand more to build a house. Am I able to ask for 10,000 more? So there was a wee bit of doubt there for a number of years. But the main significant issue now is, as you say, the infrastructure. I know of 4 developments that are basically could easily be started in the morning. There'd be massive demand for them. Houses would sell all day long, but there's no infrastructure for the sewage, and they can't get connected to sewer. So that's it. The development can't even start, and that's happening. There's particular towns whereby there can be no building whatsoever done in because of the sewage, and that is going to have a massive impact here because there's already a shortage of houses. So if there's a shortage, and for the last few years there's been steady building, but it hasn't caught up. Whereas if you put a brake on that, and that shortage is just going to continue to rise and rise, then I would predict there could be a big increase. So not a big increase, but a significant increase in house prices in the future.
And funny, just to even touch on that, I know obviously the latest figures were released there just in around Christmas time, and I think was it Northern Ireland house prices were up 8%.
House prices have been rising now easily for the last 12 years, 15 years, on an upward trend.
And you maybe might not think 8%, but 8% when you add it up is quite a substantial. I think it was Northern Ireland's average for a house price now, and please don't fact check me on this, but I think judging by what I was reading was 196 for an average house. Which probably even 6 or 7 years ago that would have been in around maybe 140, 150,000.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's nearly a £50,000 increase in the space of 6 or 7 years. So obviously that's going to be a consideration, as you say, from whether or not you're buying a new build house compared to a slightly older house that's maybe going to be slightly cheaper on the market. When you take into consideration what the price of a new build is going to be in terms of what people are maybe earning and that side of things, it's getting it's quite substantial. But then it's back to Roy's argument of if you want it, you'll go and get it.
I said it many times, if you want something and you put your mind to it and you put the plan in place, everything's achievable.
So that's in terms of that's kind of all I wanted to touch on, was that sort of new build, old build. What do you consider? Is it back to the kind of the location side of things? Is it maybe close to work, close to schools? Then sort of looking at what houses you've got in that area, and then basically back to personal preference. Would you like a brand spanking new house, or are you happy enough to go in and maybe give a lick of paint around some of the rooms and freshen it up a bit and maybe do the outside a bit? And for some people that'll be like a brand new house for them anyway.
Generally you find first time buyers, where possible and they can afford it, they'll go for the brand new house. From an investor point of view, you normally find they go for the pre-owned house, and that's simply just due to the fact the figures don't stack up from a return on investment point of view, because the cost of the house is quite a lot. They're not going to get a high enough rent to make it attractive, and that's why they go for the older house. Now some landlords balance their portfolio, because at least if they have a few houses maybe which are brand new, even though they're maybe not getting a real good return on it from a basically from a management point of view and a cost point of view and maintenance point of view, you've got no issues. You normally find a house, a brand new house. If you did buy a brand new house and you were to rent it out, you generally find you'd have that tenant for many, many years. They'll not move out, or you'll find a tenant, no problem at all. And again, as we said earlier on, as an owner, whether you're living in the house or renting the house, you should have little to no maintenance for a considerable number of years.
Yeah. So when it comes to property sourcing, that side of things then, and if you are thinking about investment, come and speak to Roy, and he'll be able to definitely direct you in the right direction. And also then, you know, whether it's first time buyers or home movers, and if you do have any questions and you are listening to this, ping us a message and we'll get back to you and we'll see if we can help you on your journey to purchasing houses. So thank you very much, Roy. We'll leave it there. A nice short episode.
Thank you.
Episode 22, folks, and make sure to come back and check out the next one.